Just touching on age, is there an age limit to get a mortgage?
Yeah, so age is a big one, really. And I think over the last 10, 20 years, because there's so many more lenders that come into the market, there is a lot more flexibility with age now. So there's some lenders that will go up to the age of 75 on PAYE income. So if you're employed and it's plausible to work up to the age of 75, they'll look at that. A lot more people are working a lot longer now, choosing retirement at a later age. And lenders will take a good look at that. There's some that will go up to potentially the age of 80. But, it's always important to think, to try and get your mortgage paid off as soon as possible to give yourself a good standard of living in the later years. I mean, age of 18 to start looking at buying, if you're fortunate enough to be that young and look at buying. But yeah, I think a lot of people come to us and they think they're too old. They'll say, I'm 55 or I'm 60, I'm never going to be able to remortgage or get a mortgage. And you'll be like, well, actually, we've got lenders here that may look at using your income now for another 15, 20 years, and they're just not aware of that.
In the right circumstances, there isn't really an age limit.
Yeah.
Especially if someone's got something like a really strong defined benefit pension, they know exactly what they're going to get for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
There's certain lenders who just are happy to accommodate that.
You do hear a lot of that, don't you? I'm too old to get a
mortgage.
It's good to hear that. Actually, there is options if you're a little bit older.
And on the other end of that, then, in years gone by, there's been situations where mum and dad have thought we'll buy a property, but we'll buy it in younger siblings and kids' names, for example. Is there an age limit for someone who's been gifted a huge chunk of money by mum and dad, and they're at an age? Is it 18? Is it 16?
On the lower end.
On the lower end.
Yeah, 18.
It has to be 18.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. So just moving away from age, I guess something that's really hot topic for Tom and I at the moment is how the market's changed from the estate agency side, but clearly that has a connection with what you guys do. We've seen big shifts in where the interest has been coming, what types of properties have been in main in interest, and for us, it's mainly been mid-range stuff. People who are having to move, people who have families, need another bedroom, can't extend, can't do the loft conversion, whatever it might be. We've definitely seen there's still an appetite at first-time buyer level. Much more thought-out process than jumping on something really quickly like it maybe used to be. But certainly in the second and third-time movers, there still seems to be an appetite there, albeit I think subject to the right properties coming on the market, which I think we all know is a frustration at the moment. Does that marry up with what you guys are seeing, and where have you seen the changes in the market for you guys?
I think first-time buyers are always there, right? We always have people who are keen to get on the property ladder. I think the area that and again, it's anecdotal. We don't have thousands and thousands of bits of data, but it's those sort of second or third moves that have been impacted, where
like your middle market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the ones who were maybe, ideally, aspirationally, we'd maybe like to move to an extra bedroom, a bit more garden, whatever it might be. But because of the change in rates, that's suddenly gone from being achievable to all of a sudden, it's a real big step. Yeah. And I've seen more people taking stock and say, well, actually, if we're not going to look at moving, because we, maybe don't want to pay the extra payments or don't want to cover the stamp duty, etc., what can we do to the house? And see more people looking at extending, renovating, etc.
Yeah. I think that I've certainly noticed, and Tom and I have had this conversation where the value, the free valuations that we do for clients, I think there's often been an ulterior motive to some of the appointments that we've been to, which are, let's see what the house is worth now in relation to what we think we might be able to buy based on what you guys have told them from a valuation. But at the back of their mind, they've been thinking, actually, do we stay? Do we extend? Which then comes back to you guys possibly to release some more funds for them. Allow that. Are you seeing people come in for further advances and other sorts of loans to renovate and improve and extend?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see, a lot of the time when people come to the end of the deals, if their plans are to remain in the property, it is looking at, especially if in the York area and you benefit from house price growth in the last 2 years, values have gone up considerably, so there is some extra equity in there. And if they want to pull that out to do the work on the property, that's great. I mean, we all know the fact, though, that material costs have increased. So actually looking at the cost benefit of extending or renovating where you are in comparison to moving, the distance between the two may have become shorter and shorter. But it's all personal perception. It's if that person makes that move, they will probably find a way of doing it and make it happen, and there will be a way of doing it. Or if they do want to extend where they are, there's always that option to look at borrowing the extra.
I was chatting to a friend of mine only a couple of months ago, and he was thought about extending his house, and he'd been asking me roughly what we thought it might cost to extend his house, and I think when we threw the figures at him, like you say, because of material and labour costs, it was a lot more than he expected. And we kind of got into how we might fund it. Now, it wasn't really any of my business, but it's the way the conversation flowed. And I said to them, well, look, when did you buy the house? And we started talking about when they bought the house and what the house might be worth. Yeah. And he had a good idea of what the house was worth. And I said, you've got a huge chunk of equity in there. Yeah. And I mentioned the phrase further advance, and he looked at me like I was off Mars. Yeah. And he said, I can have 2 mortgages? And I said, you can have 3, you can have 4. And I said, you need to speak to some experts I can't advise you on this, but you need to. So he was completely oblivious that he could go back to his lender and say, give me 50 grand, give me 60 grand, which is probably what his extension was going to cost. And even in the rates that we're in today, was still going to be quite an affordable way of creating what he wanted without the cost of moving homes. He's no good for us guys, but ultimately the reasoning for doing it was sensible, and that the money that he could borrow was probably going to be quite.
The only thing with that we sometimes do see with people is it is affordability based, so it is a new mortgage application. You sometimes come across people who say, I want to take some equity out of my property, and then when you start talking about affordability, they sort of say, well, it's my money in there, why can't I just take it out? And it doesn't work like that. You are borrowing the money. So, but as you say, subject to it being affordable and the lender being happy with it, then it's an option.
One thing that really interests me is the investment in the buy-to-let market. Can you just sort of give us your opinion and thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely more difficult than it was, 6, 8, 10 months ago. That's, without a doubt. And it all goes back to the rise in interest rates. So generally speaking, unlike a residential mortgage where a lender is going to be looking at your income and your outgoings to assess how much they can lend, it's all focused on the rent, and they take that rental figure and then apply a calculation to spit out an amount of what you can borrow essentially. And it's quite a sort of black and white process, and the way that they determine that is based on interest rates. So because interest rates have gone up, they're forced to stress the calculation at a higher level, which you just has seen a reduction in the amount that people can borrow. And it has a big impact. So in certain instances, you're talking tens of thousands of pounds difference in terms of what they could borrow 8 months ago to what they could borrow now. And certainly at the higher loan to values, 70, 75%, it's just much, much more difficult to be able to get that buy-to-let mortgage, particularly on your sort of standard single family units.
And 25% is still the minimum as it always has been. That's not changed.
Yeah, exactly. That's not changed. So in theory, you can still buy a buy-to-let with a 25% deposit, but certainly around here, you're going to struggle if it's a standard sort of, just a family or professional let. The numbers are probably not going to stack up.
There are some lenders in the market, and this is, goes back to educating people within the market, that will look at doing something called top slicing. So what that is taking your personal income. So if you have a healthy personal income and say low outgoings, you will be able to top up what you need by utilising some of that personal income.
Okay.
So they won't take the whole affordability off what the rental income is coming in for the buy-to-let.
Yeah.
You may have the option to use your personal income to actually achieve the loan amount that you need.
Okay.
So you might see more of that coming forward.
For people who may be watching this and are looking to get into a buy-to-let market for a pension or a longer-term investment, and you obviously can't give us exact numbers because it's subjective to individual cases, but is there, you talk about stress testing. Is there a sum of money that, if my buy-to-let's getting me £800 a month, where can that mortgage go to, roughly? What they want in between, say the £500 a month mortgage and the £800 a month income, is £300 enough for them, or are they wanting more than that nowadays?
Yeah, so it's quite generic on a scale of looking at that question, because you've got the different amounts that people borrow, the different property prices, the different amounts of rents that are coming in. But what we have seen is people's or landlords' rents in comparison to the mortgage going up, being squeezed and squeezed. So some even on a level playing field where the mortgage is now the same amount as the rent that's coming in. And with being a landlord, you've got all your other costs involved, such as taxes, management costs, capital gains tax when you sell the property, wear and tear, repair fees, finding tenants, and that will have a big impact sort of on their top line. And they'll look at it, you'll probably get a few more landlords looking at saying, well, are we actually, is this profitable business anymore? And you may find that some that have a couple of properties that are getting, hiked on the mortgage rates and on taxes, etc., think, does it work out anymore? Or is now the time to maybe look at disposing of that and investing the money somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely got a client at the moment who is looking to get out. And that's, so she's probably in the later 50s, so she's certainly not at retirement age just yet. And there is a remortgage situation on the horizon, and they've instructed us to sell because she's looked at her monthlies in terms of her mortgage payments. She's looking at her exit strategy, and she's realising that when these rates that she re-enters it back into the mortgage market are going to be so much higher, she's not making any money. So her attitude is, well, I've done well, I'll take my money out, I'll pay my taxes, and I'll reinvest that into something else, or may aid her to retire early. But having had that conversation with her, there was never an intention to sell that property. That property in part of the portfolio was one that she was always going to keep. There were exit plans where she was going to use other properties to service debt, but that was one that she really, it's the first one that's coming to its end of its fixed rate, and she's fixed into far better rates than what she's going to get. And that property's leasing for £1,000 a month. So you guys, knowing the numbers that you do, know how much she's getting squeezed on that. So it's an interesting one. Have you had many investment clients, buy-to-let investors that you deal with who are coming to you and considering coming out of the market because of that?
Yeah, I've had a message from a client last week, and he's got 6 texting me saying, I've got 2 that I just want to get rid of. I just want to get.
There could be like a danger here where it could saturate the market if you've got a lot of, you have 5 or 6 properties there. I've got a couple. Ollie's got a couple. All of a sudden, there's a bit of danger there. I think
the ones, your real professional landlords, they've got 20, 30, 40. They've had them over, tens of years, are probably just going to ride it out, and they've probably got enough of a portfolio to, on some they're going to be making some, on others they're going to be making a slight loss, and it balances itself out, and they'll probably stick with it. It's your ones, your classic example, self-employed, don't have a pension. Instead of a pension, I bought a buy-to-let. Those are looking at it and thinking, hold on a minute, I'm not really earning anything on a monthly basis. I'm getting clobbered for tax.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem, as we've spoken before about, the investors look like the monsters in this world, don't we, to a lot of the outsiders, but we have to appreciate whether you're a landlord or not, that these landlords are incredibly important to the housing market in a bigger picture, and that be that it's providing much needed rental properties. If the government, more importantly than the interest rate, could attract more investment buy-to-let landlords, then the soaring cost of rents would come down, because there's a supply issue, which is why rents have continued to rise. Interest rates going up has hampered younger people and second, third time movers moving, so they might have to go into a rented property. I think there's a much bigger picture for us talking about mortgages on the buy-to-let world, that the taxes that are involved in that. It's not quite as hunky-dory and sunny as you think.
Let's not pretend there's not bad landlords out there, because there absolutely are, and I don't think anyone's suggesting that there aren't. But at the same time, this sort of perception that landlords are there stacking cash month on month, it's just not. It's not the reality. I'm sure there are some that are, but for most of them, they're just about making it work. And for a lot of them, it just about works when rates were at 2%. It doesn't work when rates are at 5.5%, 6%. The numbers just don't.
In a way, being penalised for kind of trying to paid their own future, haven't they? Because you're always told put money into a pension, and there's some good tax reliefs in putting monies into pensions. Yeah. But for those who have thought, you know what, no, I won't put quite so much in my pension. Yeah. I'm going to save some money. I've inherited some money here. What do I do with it? You know what? I'll go and put a secondary investment in. They're not there. These guys and male or female, they're not there to make huge sums of money every month, but they're there not to lose money. Yeah. Otherwise, it is a bad investment. Yeah.
And often improve it and improve the stock of housing and do improvements to it, etc. There's all that side of stuff that doesn't get taken into account.